So we'll start with epithelial tissue, and epithelial tissue has some common characteristics about it, and it's typically a sheet of cells put together in either a single layer or multiple layers. And these layers of cells, the bottom layer touches what's called the basement membrane. So this little membrane right here is the basement membrane. And then the top layer is open to free space, whether that's the air outside your skin or the juice inside your stomach or the blood inside your vessels. It's some kind of fluid-filled space, either gas or liquid. It's typically avascular, which means that there's not a lot of blood flow. These tissues are very close to surfaces with air, that they don't really need vessels to get oxygen to them. Typically, epithelial tissue is involved in protection, so things like the skin, protecting your inside from things like bacteria or puncture, excretion, and secretion. So secretion is usually secretion of kind of a mucus or a liquid. This is going to happen in your lungs and your trachea. You actually have a mucus covering. It's going to help trap particles. And then excretion. Through the lungs, we actually excrete CO2. So excretion is getting rid of waste from the body. Absorption is receiving nutrients from the body. So again, the lining of the digestive tract, we have our small intestine. This is where we absorb nutrients. Epithelial tissue can also be involved in filtration. So we're filtering out kind of things that we want to excrete. So this is the job of the kidneys. So the things that we need to filter have to actually go through an epithelial tissue to get filtered. And then sensation. So the skin has some close connections to nervous tissue, which is going to help provide sensation. Epithelial tissues, there's a lot of these. There's about 8 tissues that we're going to look at. And I have a system for remembering them based on their shape and their number of cell layers. So this has one single layer. So if an epithelial tissue has one single layer, it is called simple. Look over here. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of cells. This is called stratified. So a strata is a layer, so stratified is going to have many layers. So when you're going to look through the different classifications of epithelial tissue, you're either going to be simple, meaning you have one layer where every single cell touches the basement membrane and every single cell touches the top. Stratified, only the bottom layer touches the basement membrane and only the top layer touches the top. There's one exception to this classification scheme with what's called pseudostratified. So it looks stratified, but it's actually not. This prefix pseudo means fake. So a pseudostratified means it's fake stratified. It's actually simple. It's only one layer, right? There's only one layer of cells touching the bottom. But it looks stratified because not every single cell makes it to the top. So these kind of tend to fold over each other and look a little bit like a stratified one under a microscope. The shapes. There are 3 different possible shapes. So the first shape is called squamous, and I like to think of squamous as squished. And so a squished cell is going to be very, very short, but much wider than it is tall, kind of like you stepped on it and squished it. The second shape is cuboidal, and it looks like a cube, where it's about as tall as it is wide. And cuboidal doesn't always have to be an actual cube. It can be kind of hexagonal like this one. Or it can be circular, where it's still about as tall as it is wide. James? And then the last shape is called columnar, and it looks like a column, like that would hold up a roof. So this is going to be very tall and relatively skinny. So a lot of the times we're going to be able to name these tissues as simple squamous epithelium, which tells you it has one layer, it's got squished cells, and it's an epithelial tissue. So the first four that we're going to look at are simple. And simple has how many layers? I hope you said it. One. Generally, one layer. A lot of the times we're going to see something called goblet cells. So that's these guys right here. These goblet cells secrete mucus. And then a lot of the times we'll see cilia. These cilia are here on the top. And cilia are going to kind of beat and create a motion for moving that mucus along. Our pseudostratified epithelium is a simple epithelium. So here's our first type, simple squamous epithelium. So this means it has one layer. They are squished looking epithelium. So this is the thinnest tissue that you can possibly imagine, which means that it's going to be used for things like rapid transport. And this is found in the alveoli of the lungs, the glomerulus in the kidneys, the stomach, the intestines. So anywhere where you're going to have secretion and absorption over any kind of surface. The simple cuboidal epithelium is again used for absorption and secretion. This is a pretty small layer as well. So simple, we've got one layer. They're cube-shaped, and it's an epithelium. So here is my single layer. There's the basement membrane. Here's the top. There's a whole lot of them here. All of these are a single layer. So here's my single cuboidal cells. And we're going to be able to easily get nutrients across the surface because it's fairly small. These are going to be found lining a lot of glands, so things like the mammary glands, your salivary glands. These are also found in the liver and the thyroid, as well as the kidney tubules and the bronchioles in your lungs. The next one we have is called simple columnar. So again, it's going to be one layer with column-shaped cells, and it's an epithelium. Again, these are only one cell layer, so these tend to be good for absorption and secretion. So here's my column-shaped cell. This down here is the basement membrane. And then this up here is actually cilia. So there's a little tiny brush border of cilia. And so this is where we're going to absorb nutrients into the small intestine. This is found inside the lining of the stomach, the gallbladder, the uterus, as well as the uterine tubes. So one thing that these cilia can do in the uterus is the cilia can actually create a little current down the tube and help eggs to travel down the uterine tube into the uterus. Here's a weird one. So pseudostratified. Pseudo means fake. So it is fake stratified. This technically only has one layer of epithelium. There are some key giveaways here. So it's not perfect, but you can see that most every cell comes all the way down to this bottom layer. And they're kind of flopped over each other because they're so squished together. But if you look at the top, it's really only one layer of these kind of big column-shaped cells kind of flopped over these little skinny cells that don't quite make it all the way. Pseudostratified epithelium is also ciliated. So one cue that you've got pseudostratified is that you've got these tons and tons of cilia up here. You're going to also often see these goblet cells for secretion of mucus and then moving the mucus along. So you have ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium in your respiratory system, so from your nose all the way to your bronchi. And one of the things they do is they have this mucus layer here, and they trap little dust particles, and that helps catch them before they get to your lungs. and then you can move them up to your throat and actually swallow them to the digestive system to help kind of clear dirt out of the lung. You also have portions of this in the male urethra for movement of contents through the male urethra, which is fairly long because it has to go through the penis. When you're looking at tissues, you're going to be looking at a lot of microscope slides like this. So this is the microscope. This is kind of the drawing, the artist rendition of this to make it easier for you to see. One thing that I like to do for studying tissues is to go on Google Images, type in the tissue, pseudostratified epithelium, and just look at like 20 or 30 different pictures of that tissue until you start to kind of recognize it. You're going to have to practice this over and over and over again until you can look at something and just go, oh, well, that's ciliated, it's got goblet cells, it's pseudostratified epithelium. So take a minute and reflect on the 4 simple epithelial tissues